Hello. The title of my presentation is, Are Professional Development Programs Enough to Ensure Change? I'm Amal Farhat from Rawafid School in Lebanon. In this presentation, I will be covering the following points. I will start with a brief introduction, then the research questions, the context and the background of the study, and then I'll move on to data collection, the findings of my study. I will have a discussion of these findings, and I will end with what these findings imply for educators and practitioners. First, professional development is usually done by schools in order to improve the quality of education. And schools, they have high hopes from professional development, and they hope to improve practices for the purpose of improving students' outcomes and achievement. Now, a lot of the times, professional development becomes synonymous to teacher training. So usually it's done solely in the form of teacher training. But is that enough? This study will answer three questions. First, to what extent did teachers implement the skills that they were trained on during a year long of professional development? And those skills that they were trained on, which of them did they implement most in their classrooms? And which of those skills did they implement least? The context of the study, it was in a K-9 school. It's a small school, and by small we mean less than 400 students. Everybody was involved in the training, in the professional development program, and in the data collection, all the teachers and all the coordinators of all subjects. The professional development program took place in 2018-2019. To test the impact of that program, we did that in 2019 and 2020. Now, at the time of testing the impact of the professional program, the professional development program, Lebanon had undergone major events that impacted education and school attendance. We had the October Revolution, and it resulted in school closure, road blockage, and we had the COVID-19 pandemic, and in addition to the port explosion and other problems that impacted schools and teaching. A little background of the study. Now, the year-long professional development program, it included training, application of the material that was presented in the training programs, assessment of teacher performance, reflections, teachers were engaged in reflection and in reviewing activities. Now, each of these was done in a cyclic manner, and the year-long program was done, consisted of 4 cycles that ended with summative evaluation. And this was the framework or the structure of the professional development, with the consultant overlooking the whole process. We had the trainers, we had coaches coaching groups of teachers, and within these groups of teachers, we had immersion mentors who would mentor their fellow teachers within the groups. And that program extended over a whole scholastic year, beginning in September and ending in May. Now, this was recorded in a peer-reviewed article, and you can find it in the Journal of Education and Training Studies. I presented about this in EduLead earlier. Now, let's move on to data collection. We had intended to collect data using questionnaires, classroom observations, and interviews and lesson plans. However, due to the events that I mentioned earlier, we could not conduct classroom observations or interviews because we had to shift our focus in professional development. So we were limited to questionnaires and lesson plans. Now, questionnaires were conducted at the end of the professional development program, and they collected teachers' opinions of the process. The lesson plans, in November and December, we collected teachers' lesson plans, and we photocopied every 10th plan to study, and we had a total of 42 plans. Now, what findings did we find? What findings did we collect in those data collection tools? Let me just mention that I talked about this in one of my blog posts. This is my blog if you're interested to read about it. Now, in the questionnaires, we found that teachers, they appreciated the professional development that included coaching and mentoring more than other training they had undergone. So we have 61% of teachers thinking that this is more helpful to them. And when comparing different trainings, they thought that the one that included mentoring and coaching was most efficient for their professional development. Now, in the lesson plans, we looked in the lesson plans for the following topics: individualization. These are topics that were covered in the training, or the core of the training. Assessment for learning, trust in the learners, interaction and group dynamics, reviewing, reflection, and continuity and follow-up. Just individualization, we did not consider because we had intended to look for that in the classroom observations. We couldn't see it in the lesson plans. Now, as for classroom interaction, we found 234 instances talking about classroom interactions in the lesson plan. 6% or 6.4% of these instances included group work, although we had stressed group work in the training, and followed by 15% for pair work. Individual work was the most. We had 54% of the instances that required students to do group work, followed by 24% of whole class work. And we can see it again. So individual work was the most, and group work was the least recorded in those plans. If we move on to reviewing activities, we had stressed 3 types of reviewing activities. Now, bridging activities are those that take place at the beginning of the class. We had 33% of those. We had end of class reviewing activities at 67%, and we had 0% of reviewing activities within the lesson, although this was stressed during the training. Now, it's important to note that our lesson plan template in Arabic and in English, it specifies that there should be a bridging activity or reviewing at the beginning of the lesson and reviewing at the end, post-lesson. But we don't have a space allocated for during lesson reviewing activities in both templates. So that's why probably we don't have we didn't see it in the lesson plans. Assessment for learning was mostly done in the form of quizzes, exercises, and answering questions. Just a little bit of games, word storm and tossing the ball. These were introduced in the training. Now, this table summarizes the findings. So we talked about reviewing, we talked about assessment for learning, trust in the learner. We had 19 instances. And they were in the form of discussion, social events, independent application, and presentation. We had 0 instances of reflection where students were required to reflect. Continuity and follow-up were only in the form of homework or assignments. Now, to discuss those findings, we say it's not easy to change practices. The practices that we already do, it's not easy to change them because these are enfossed in the teacher's performance, because that's how they learned as students, or maybe because they've been doing them for such a long time. Teachers tend to rely on activities that they are accustomed to, although they undergo long professional development programs, but they tend to do things in the way that they are accustomed to do them. Now, practices that require higher order thinking are least implemented. So that's why we had 0 instances of reflection activities. However, we had a lot of reviewing activities in the lesson plans. Practices before the training impacted practices after the training. So reviewing activities that are in the form of bridging and end of the lesson activities, these were already done before the training. Now, we introduced during lesson reviewing, and these were not abided by. So things that teachers already did before, they tended to keep on doing them after the training. Visual reminders are very necessary to implement new practices. And this could be, this is deducted from the fact that we have bridging and reviewing activities in the pre and the post stages of the lesson plan, and teachers, they abided by these. However, they did not do a during lesson reviewing, and it could be because they didn't have that visual reminder in the lesson plan template. We assume that training that is followed by coaching and mentoring to result in better teacher performance. And what we recommend for practitioners and educators is that not to rely on self-reported data. So sometimes we report that things are going so well, but in actual performance, it does not, that's not reflected. Although it's important to collect such data, but we should not take it as actually what is happening in the classroom. Pedagogy and theory should be integrated in training. So it's not enough to just equip the teacher with activities. They should understand the pedagogy and the theory behind those to ensure better implementation. Coaches need pedagogical knowledge to use during coaching. So although we had assigned coaches to coach groups, we believe that those coaches, they needed more training on how to coach. Data about performance should be continuously collected. So sometimes we do those excellent professional development programs and we think everybody is happy and we're happy. But we need to collect data to see if these programs are actually impacting teachers' performance and students' achievement. Teachers as learners can benefit from feedback on their practice. They need to receive appropriate, constructive feedback from others, and they need to reflect on their own work. Visual reminders we found that are very necessary to remind teachers of necessary practices. It could be in the lesson plan template. It could be in an infographic you have in the teacher's room. It could be in a poster you have in the hallways. Visual reminders are always a good way to remind us of what to do. And that's it. Thank you very much.